You're listening to Building the Broncos with Nick Kendell and Carl Dumler, Broncos Country's leading draft and scouting analysts. Get on over to milehighhuddle.com to sound off on all things Broncos.
Hello there, Broncos Country, and it is once again time for another episode of Building the Broncos. I'm your host, Carl Dumler, and with me as always, I have my co-host and good friend, Mr. Nick Kendell. Nick, how are you doing, buddy?
Hey, doing pretty well. Just trying to recover from a weekend of camping. So, you don't get as good a sleep. You're out in the sun. You're out probably drinking a few too many adult beverages, and so a little tired. And we're recording on Tuesday instead of Monday, so that's kind of throwing me off a little bit as well. But, can't complain. Here with you and, just grinding along. So hopefully these storms will pass, man. I'm already looking ahead at the weather, and yikes, more rain on the way.
Yeah. I woke up this morning to my daughter being about a foot from my face saying, "Tea party time, Dad." And that was after about 3 hours of sleep after I stayed up writing an article for Mile High Huddle and getting a couple other things done. So although I will say it was a pretty cute way to wake up.
Not the worst.
No, it's not. And I did fall asleep a couple times, and my daughter got a little frustrated with me. But the joys of having a daughter and getting to be a part of tea parties.
Yeah, that's I have not had many tea parties in my day. Living that non-child life at this point. We'll see how that goes. But we've got the wedding coming up. One step at a time.
First comes marriage, then comes love.
I saw a really dark meme with that the other day.
Did you?
Yeah, I did. It was like cyanide and happiness or something. And I was like,
oh my goodness.
Oh, yikes. Yeah, it was bad. But anyway, yeah, no, it's definitely on the more tired side. Got to do some laundry after this, and got to do grocery shopping and everything like that. But yeah, doing well. Happy to be here with you, and excited about today's topic.
Yeah, this is kind of an interesting one. It's exactly what this podcast is all about. But before we get into that conversation, I want to make sure that you can find us on Twitter. You can find me at Carl Dumler MHH. And of course, you can find Nick at Nick Kendell MHH. And you can follow the podcast Twitter account at BTB Football Pod. And make sure you subscribe to our show and leave us a rating, as we value your input. You can find the show on iTunes, Stitcher, and even that of YouTube. Also, make sure you head over to Mile High Huddle, an affiliate of 24/7 Sports and the CBS Sports Digital, to find ours and our co-writers' articles and all things pertaining to your Denver Broncos. Also, if you enjoy our show, make sure you head over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating, where Building the Broncos, along with Huddle Up, are found under the Huddle Up podcast. This podcast is powered by Overtime Media. So looking at this Broncos team, there was a lot of connections being made between the Broncos and Drew Lock before the draft ever happened. And, of course, here he is. He's a Denver Bronco. And what many consider to be a pretty darn good fit in a Scangarillo / Shanahan / Kubiak style offense. And but right now it's looking like 2019 is going to be the year of Flacco. Whether you like Flacco or not, that's going to most likely be the case unless he gets injured or Drew Lock just really does something special. I don't see it happening, but right now at least it's looking like Drew Lock might be the future of the franchise, or at least they're going to give him that good chance. And we wanted to talk a little bit about what can the Broncos do, to, at least roster building wise, to set Drew Lock up for success. Because I look at a guy like Patrick Mahomes and what's happening in Kansas City. Now, Patrick Mahomes, he is a star player, but it also helps when you have maybe the top tight end in football, the most unique weapon in all of football in Tyreek Hill. You got some other receiving options out there. You've got a pretty darn strong offensive line in front of him. He's had a pretty strong running game working with him as well. And so they really set him up for success there in Kansas City. Well, what can the Broncos do to do the same for Drew Lock? Because right now I would say that the roster is missing a few pieces to really take it to that next level when we're talking. I mean, this isn't just for Drew Lock, but this could be even for Flacco. But we're kind of set roster-wise for the Broncos this season. So what are we looking at in 2020, free agency, draft, all those kind of things? And who are some players that the Broncos can really look at right now on the roster and say, okay, this is a building block that we need to keep around for a little bit. And so I thought we just kind of go position by position on the offense and kind of look at what what fits best with Locke? What can really exemplify his talents here in Denver? And so let's start with the running back position. What would be that perfect type of running back to pair with Drew Lock? What would you say about that?
A cheap one. One that's on the rookie contract and not expensive. So we're looking at Drew Lock here, and he's been a guy at Missouri who's not been – it's honestly kind of interesting, the juxtaposition between his skill set and the offense, playing the more wide-open offense 2 years ago, better stats, throwing the ball downfield more. But, turnovers, some little bit of wildness to him this year. More run-heavy offense at Missouri, more pro-style, a lot more short passes, quick passes, timing passes, less RPO. So for me, a running back that would be important for him is one that, just has some versatility to him. Doesn't need to be a superstar, but, again, I really was a big fan of him coming out, so he's an example I use, although I don't condone his actions. But Kareem Hunt, not a burner, not anything like that, but balanced, can run inside or outside zone well, and if you want to split him out and use him in the pass game, you can do that. He's fine after the catch. He can run decent routes, and he's a fine blocker. So really just a well-rounded running back, really. You don't need to have a superstar. But and I think that having a superstar running back produces its own set of problems because, look, a great example is the Rams with Todd Gurley. You spent, I believe, was the 10th overall draft pick on him, and you knew there was some injury concerns there, long-term ability to play, but really talented when he did play. And now there's issues with the knee, might be arthritis, and they paid him that big contract. So really for me, the running back out of all the positions, I guess, on this offensive or on this offense outside of fullback, running back would probably be the one that I'm kind of just like, it matters most that you can just find somebody who's capable. But as far as the type, as long as they have a little bit of inside outside zone ability and you have somebody who can be a solid pass catcher and run block, which I was watching some San Francisco tape recently, working on an article for that, and it's crazy how much they utilize the receiver in the pass game, splitting them out even and isolating them. So I think that's a big thing, but really it comes down to youth and cheapness for me, as the layman, as a cop-out as that is.
So when looking at 2020, I guess, is that something you're looking to upgrade? Because really Phillip Lindsay's not really – he had a great season. Let's not undersell what he did, but he's more of that slasher, not your all-around kind of running back, I would say. He's a willing blocker, but he's not a great blocker. He's shown some ability as a receiver, but he's not a great receiver at this point.
I would love to get him in a more Alvin Kamara role and pair him with a Melvin Ingram type. Now, that could be the discount version. Phillip Lindsay could be the discount version of Kamara there. Got to show better in the pass game, obviously. And then Freeman as the discount version of Melvin Ingram. But that's kind of what I'm looking to do there. That way you can utilize both, keep the numbers down, not be so reliant on one guy, and just complement the offense all around. But, as far as adding another running back next offseason, with Devontae Booker leaving, they're probably going to have to, right? Like whether that becomes a cheap free agent, in the Stephen Ridley kind of mold, maybe a Rex Burkhead kind of mold type of thing. And then, or in the draft, mid rounds, they should be picking up. They do have another 3rd round pick next year from the Steelers in that trade, and they'll have some comp picks as well. So those are the areas that I'd look, but I'd just be constantly looking to add cheap running backs on their rookie contract, rounds, probably day 3 most of the time, but, round 3 undrafted free agent, just to kind of cycle them in and out. And, there's more of a shotgun approach where I'm not using high resources on it, but I'm using enough where I can get cheap bodies in there that fit certain roles and fit the offense year in and year out.
Yeah, I will say, I know some of our fans are like, oh my gosh, you're talking about the 2020 draft, but it does look like a pretty darn good running back class.
Really good.
And there could be some real stars among this group. And I could actually see the Broncos making a decision to go ahead and draft a running back in those mid-round picks, like you said, or late-round picks somewhere in there. Because, even if you believe in Freeman and you believe in Phillip Lindsay, if Booker's gone, that still leaves a hole. You still need at least 3 or 4 running backs on this roster that can do something. So I do see it as a position that they can not maybe upgrade, but can continue to add more versatility to it.
Yeah. I agree with you there. And they're going to have to figure out somebody is more in the passing game if Devontae Booker is moving on. So that's really the big thing. But again, like I said, running back, fullback, you could probably find guys. I mean, obviously, we'll see what this Rich Gainsborough offense looks like because they definitely used Juszczyk a fair amount in the Kyle Shanahan offense. But Juszczyk is a unicorn. He's like far and away the most versatile, valuable fullback in football. Like there's nobody who compares to him right now. Granted, he's still a fullback, so how valuable is he actually?
Right.
But still. So running back really just, healthy, young, cheap bodies. That way you can better spend money elsewhere. As cold as that sounds. I mean, running back, use them, abuse them, lose them, repeat. So, yes, that's a little heartless, but if you're out there listening, don't let your sons play running back, because they got 4 years. At least if I'm GM, they got 4 years, and I'm not really signing anybody to a second contract unless they're that like cheap discard pile kind of guy.
Right. We were just actually having this conversation with a couple of the other Mile High Huddle writers, and one of them mentioned that Royce Freeman probably won't last longer than his 4 years because of all this wear and tear in college and what he's going to have here in the NFL. And I'm kind of going, that's pretty much all running backs right now, unless they're those star players. And I mean,
even then, let him walk.
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, Le'Veon Bell, maybe the best running back in football, and the Steelers didn't want to commit to him. And even the team that did commit to him, now his head coach is saying, well, I didn't really want to spend that money. So not a great look. I mean, that is Adam Gase.
Ugly.
But beyond that, I mean, it still shows even the top guys are not really thought of it very high. I mean, I don't think the Rams maybe pay Gurley as much as they did if they didn't have a rookie quarterback or a rookie contract quarterback, I guess you could say, where you can maybe go spend a little bit more money in those kind of positions and take a few chances. But I don't know. It is. It's kind of a dying position in the NFL, or not really a dying position, but one that's you're always looking at the young guys more than you are the veterans. And so now that brings us maybe to one of the more interesting positions when I was thinking of this whole topic and thinking of Drew Lock and the type of player that he is, and that is the offensive line. Now, you and I are big trench guys. We love if you can build great trench warfare, you're going to be a pretty good team most years. And looking at the Broncos, that 2020 year, you're going to have Reisner, Bowles if he develops, and Juwan James. McGovern, possibility that he gets signed long-term. We'll kind of see how that ends up playing out. Ronald Leary, probably not with the Broncos past this upcoming season, even this upcoming season. And so my big question, though, is because Drew Lock is such a mobile quarterback, guy that likes to get to the edges, can move around, manipulate the pocket, all those kind of things. Is offensive line one of those positions you really have to prioritize with a quarterback like him compared to a guy like Joe Flacco where he's a sitting duck back there and you need a good offensive line in front of him?
Yeah, but at the same time, he was a guy that sometimes when pressure got to him, I mean, throwing it way back here, but when Goodberry was on here, he was talking about Drew Lock under pressure and losing his damn mind. And that kind of got a little bit better over time, but still kind of made some erratic decisions, especially rolling to his left when he felt pressure. So I think for any good young quarterback, obviously getting them weapons helps, but making them feel safe in the pocket and not take a massive beating is fine. Now, there is a question about, how much does an offensive line, like how much of a difference does a solid offensive line to a great offensive line make? Like that's a question that definitely is something that backs my brain because you see teams like the Redskins and the Cowboys who have invested all these resources in the offensive line and put all this money in there, even the Raiders a few years ago. And we're talking about some of the mediocre to worst teams in the NFL there. So, there is a line there. But I think that for the offensive line for Locke, it's going to be big. And watching him, specifically his skill set, I think that he is a good enough athlete and has good enough wherewithal where that edge pressure is something he can deal with. He can step up, he can escape it out wide if he needs to. Much better to the right than the left right now. Maybe we'll see if that changes. But that interior pressure, it's when he feels interior pressure that he starts to really devolve in his game. So I think it's going to be really important for the Broncos to work on that interior trio so they're at least solid and they can protect him in the pass game. And, the scheme is going to be some part of that. Play action weapons that they have that can get uncovered and open quickly. That matters too. It's synergy in the offense. But still, I think that interior trio is one that has me the most concerned right now. Connor McGovern, solid starter, but he's like a war of zero type of guy, like he looks like just an average replaceable kind of guy. So we'll see what this year's brings with Munchak. Obviously that could change, but right guard, Leary, we talked about in the last podcast we just did, could be on his way out. And then you got guys like Barclay, Wilkinson, Sam Jones. So yeah, that right now that interior trio does concern me a lot. Luckily, interior offensive linemen are probably, they're more valuable to me than running back, but they're again positions that you can find later, develop, etc. And you can find even just competent guys on the market year to year if you need to. Look at what the Broncos did during Peyton Manning's last couple seasons. But still, that's my biggest concern with this offensive line, and I think that's something that while we do like to talk about, like we talked about it last week, Munchak, coming in helping the offensive line, I think it's something that's going to take a bit of time because I don't know if the pieces are in place right now.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think you at least need to either commit some more free agency money next offseason or a high draft pick to continue to add to this offensive line. I know they've used a first-round pick, second-round pick, and, of course, big money for James. But if Drew Lock is your true investment, keeping him safe and, like you said, secure back there, feeling comfortable, all those kind of things, but also taking less hits. Because you don't want that guy getting injured back there if you really do view him as your future. I look at Derek Carr. He had a great offensive line, but he was a guy that he's still showing he struggles to last the entire season without getting some kind of injury. And that was with a great offensive line in front of him. And now they're kind of looking at, well, we might need to move on from this guy. And even this past draft, there was a lot of conversation that the Raiders were going to move on from Derek Carr. And I think injuries played part of that picture. And I'm not saying Drew Lock, he's never really had injuries. So I'm not saying that's a part of his picture. But again, you just want to do everything possible to make that quarterback feel comfortable in what they're doing and make their job a little easier. So if I'm a person that's spending money or looking at what the Broncos will have in that 2020 season for cap space, I'd be willing to definitely put some money towards that offensive line.
Yeah, it's definitely something that's going to be a point of contention still this season, and that we'll see. Garrett Bowles is a guy he's not a bubble player, so to speak, but he's a bubble player as far as long-term roster spot and projection. So we'll see. And then the interior, again, like I said, a lot of questions there. So this offensive line, got to trust Munchak. He's one of the best in the business. Hopefully, maybe we'll be able to get a Villanueva kind of guy that just comes out of nowhere and steps up and can be a solid player. But just a lot of questions right now and a lot of projections. So we'll see. All right, well, we're going to take a quick break, but we're going to continue talking about the future of the offense and how to build a great offense around quarterback Drew Lock.
Huddle Up podcast listeners, check this out. If you've been thinking about becoming a Mile High Huddle VIP subscriber, now's the time to do it. We have a phenomenal offer to get your foot in the door as a new VIP. Right now, you can get your first month of VIP for $1. That's insane value, and it immediately gives you access to all of the premium content we produce. If you want to subscribe for the year, new annual subscribers will get 30% off the cost of a membership. Never before have we been able to offer new subscribers this kind of introductory incentive to pull the trigger. This is how you get access to our VIP mailbags every Friday. Zach and I answer each and every question from our VIPs, even if it means an episode goes a little bit long. Jumping on this offer also gives you 100% access to every piece of content we produce on the front page, including our Broncos film room breakdowns and every other form of deep dive Broncos content our site is known for. VIPs also get entry into our members-only MHH Insiders Forum, where you hear the insider buzz first from our talented and plugged-in staff, and you get to engage with other passionate and knowledgeable fans just like you. Becoming a VIP subscriber, you guys, it's the best way to support the work and the time Zach and I put into producing a daily podcast for your listening pleasure and edification. So go to milehighhuddle.com, click on the green banner, choose monthly or annual, and you are locked in. The regular season will be here before you know it, so jump on one of these offers, Broncos country.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
Alrighty, and we are back here on the Building the Broncos podcast. I am Nick Kendell along with Carl Dumler, and we're going to shift gears here. We talked about running backs and offensive line. Now we're going to get a little bit more to the glamour positions, and we're going to kick it off here with Carl, I would say your favorite position. I'm just going to say that for you, the wide receiver.
It is. I mean, I love watching wide receivers. It's the position I know the best. And looking at the Broncos and what they have for Drew Lock, I do think they have a pretty solid foundation here. I mean, Courtland Sutton as that ex-receiver makes a lot of sense. He fits that role pretty well, guy that can get down the field. Drew Lock's going to like being able to chuck it up to this guy and let him go win some one-on-one battles, but also a red zone threat, a guy that as he develops more route running, by 2020, he should be really hitting his stride as a wide receiver. So that should be great for Drew Lock. And then, of course, you got Deshaun Hamilton, that guy that can work over the middle of the field. And here's something I wanted to say, because there's different kinds of slot receivers. This is something people need to understand. There are the Julian Edelman type that can win in that first 5 yards. And, I mean, I've seen a lot of there's somebody on Twitter that posts all the time about Tom Brady completing 5-yard passes and being like, "Oh my gosh, that is the greatest pass ever." And
It's Sports Talk Barry, isn't it?
Is it okay? I couldn't quite remember who it was.
He's got the picture of that mesothelioma guy. He's been injured. Okay, all right.
I can't remember exactly, but anyway, and that's part of. I mean, that's Edelman. He can get open in a hurry, then get those yards after catch, all those kind of things. And that's what the Patriots look for, those guys that win in the short area part of the field. Now, Drew Lock's game is not exactly those short passes. That's where he struggled the most in his college career. And where he had a lot of success was those medium and long passes. And so this is why I think Hamilton is actually a very, very good fit with Lock, because a lot of his work were on those medium passes when he was at Penn State. Those 5 to 10 to 15 yards down the field, and 5 to 15. Let's just say that area. That's Hamilton's sweet spot. And so I'm very interested to see how those two can work together there over the middle of the field. I will say Drew Lock did a lot of his work more outside the hashes. He started working a little bit more over the middle his senior year, but before that it was outside the hashes a lot. And so, I mean, he's still got to get a little more comfortable throwing over the middle of the field. And that'll help with having Noah Fant, having Hamilton there. Sutton can run some routes over the middle. And I am interested to see, I guess, a little bit of the growth of Brendan Langley as a wide receiver. And then, of course, the rookie Winfrey. I don't know what either of those guys are. So it's kind of hard to tell exactly where the Broncos are going to need to go with the wide receiver position moving forward. But I can say with pretty good certainty they still need that deep threat wide receiver. I mean, we've talked about it on here. The Broncos don't really have that kind of guy on the roster right now. I mean, Langley, what do you run, a 4.5 40 in college?
I think he was 4.4. He's the fastest one right now.
Okay. Well, I mean, and that's still, I mean, that's good. And he could maybe be that deep threat guy. We'll kind of see. But for me, I'm still looking for that Brandon Cooks kind of guy.
Yeah.
Where teams absolutely have to respect what he can do down the field. And I just don't feel like the Broncos have that right now. And if there's something that they could really be aggressive in trying to do this next offseason, I could see it being go get that deep threat guy, because that's what Drew Lock loved that in college. He loved to chuck it down the field. That was one of his bread and butter plays that teams absolutely had to respect, and it opened up so much more for the offense. They didn't have great playmakers by any means, but they did have a nice speedster in what's his name?
Marquise Goodwin?
No, I'm talking about Missouri.
Emmanuel Hall?
Yeah, Emmanuel Hall.
Yeah.
That was one thing that they did have for that offense for Drew Lock. The rest of the players were not great by any means.
Besides the tight ends.
Right. They did have some tight ends that were pretty darn good.
Yeah.
But yeah, otherwise there wasn't a whole lot to work with for him. And so if you can get that burner type that really opens up everything else, the middle of the field, the run game, play action, all those kind of things, the Broncos, I think, would be really, really happy with their wide receiver core at that point.
Yeah, no, I agree with you 110%. Honestly, like I just did a piece on it, right? Like last week, the speed of the Broncos. They really are lacking a speed threat on this offense, and it goes beyond, a deep threat. That's a compliment to it, but really, that speed is used not only to stretch the field vertically, but horizontally. At least in the Scangarello or the Shanahan offense. I mean, Marquise Goodwin, while he was able to stretch the seam and run that way, there's a lot of pre-snap motions as well, or the crossing routes where just his pure speed and his ability to cross the field quickly create space for other players over the middle of the field or outside the hash marks. So you have Sanders. Is he going to be the same guy? We don't know. Coming off that Achilles, probably not going to have the speed. I mean, even if he wasn't coming off an Achilles, age 30 player, that can't probably be a true speed guy anymore. You got Hamilton, who's more the technical route runner, the guy that you can trust on third down, solid hands, etc., but not really a true speed guy. Cortland Sutton, I mean, Noah Fant ran faster than Cortland Sutton did, but Sutton's a good agility guy and height, weight, speed down the field. So as a true speed player, not just as a deep threat, but a speed player that can threaten teams in a multitude of ways, it's just not there right now. So that's something that I think they really are going to be looking forward to, and that's something that, luckily next draft class is going to have a lot of wide receiver options, a lot of talented wide receiver options early. But man, it would be nice to get Drew Lock somebody who can really just create space. I mean, we've talked about it on here. Like over the past few years, the passing game has just been pulling out teeth, right? Like everything just seems like it's so labored, whether it be getting guys open or catching the ball or blocking or anything. It's just so tough. But getting guys who can create space for others. I mean, Noah Fant's a start to that, but getting guys who can create space for others or you can scheme them open, because teams have to pay attention to these players. And just because of the nature of it, whether it be a single high safety or zone coverage or et cetera, or just because they're so athletic that they beat man coverage, that creating spacing and chances for these other players is something that hopefully will be coming with the new system, but it has as much to do with the players as well. So Fant is a start. Offensive line getting better with Munchak, hopefully is a start, etc. Sutton and Hamilton, excited to see where they go with. That's a start. But as far as a true wide receiver where you have to pay attention to because of that speed, I just don't see it on the roster right now.
Yeah, it's definitely, I mean, if you can get that kind of guy. And then the other thing that I would say at the wide receiver position that would be just a really nice help is that gadget player.
See, I'm thinking of that as a 2-for-1.
As a 2-for-1 to get the speedster, but also have him be a gadget player.
Tyreek Hill is the perfect example, right? Like because they use him in those crosses and the pre-snap motion and everything, but also he's the deep threat. And that's what Marquise Goodwin is for them, for the 49ers, right? Like imagine if the Broncos would have drafted Terry McLaurin, right? Like he is a deep threat. You can use him that way because he has that speed. He can threaten you that way. He can make that single high safety, put them in a position with that Yankee concept where you have that crosser and the post route, where the safety, if it's a single high free safety, has to make that decision. But there's other plays where you're using them pre-snap motion behind the line of scrimmage, and whether or not you give it to them, the linebackers are going to have to keep their eyes on them and get sucked in and have to just delay for a second. Safeties too, and make the defensive linemen play disciplined. And if they don't, then you have a gap. So I would love a player who can do a little bit of both. That's why I'm saying I'm not looking for just a pure deep threat. I'm not looking for Ted Ginn Jr. I'm looking for a guy who can, you get them the ball. They can do a little bit of yak stuff. You move them pre-snap. Right. Maybe I'm asking too much. Obviously, Tyreek Hill's like a different type of level player. We're not going to get into the off-field issues. But as far as the pre-snap stuff, I think is huge too. And that's why, getting a guy like Marquise Goodwin, there's going to be issues sometimes. Goodwin dropped a fair amount of passes, and he's not great at getting enough press. But as far as threatening the seam, threatening out wide, the pre-snap motion speed that he forces teams to respect, just having that guy out there changes the dynamic of the offense.
So are Colorado fans licking their lips saying Chenault?
They probably are. I wish he was faster.
Yeah,
He's a big slot, right? Like, and he's a lot of fun. Like, he's almost like a running back wide receiver where he's so dynamic with the balls after his hands. But is he a guy who's separating a lot?
Right.
I don't know.
Right. No, I'm with you. I just that was a guy when you're talking about a gadget guy. Chenault's that all around, could be a running back, wide receiver. I mean, there's so many things that guy could do on the field, but he's not quite that deep threat that you're hoping for. I'm with you.
I'm looking more at Jalen Reagor and Henry Ruggs.
Yep. Two very good names there, and definitely make a lot of sense for the Broncos. But I do think this could be a position that you see the Broncos use a first or second round pick next year. Get that one more weapon to add for Drew Lock. I mean, like I said, if you're trying to build around your young quarterback, get him some weapons. Get him some players that make his life very much easier. I mean, like I said, Patrick Mahomes, he's such a great example of what you do to build around a player. And he just has such a system set up for success, players that fit the system very, very well. And it led to one of the more dynamic offenses in NFL history. And one that, I mean, if Bronco fans are being honest, we're pretty jealous of what he showed. And so for Drew Lock, you get that kind of guy of a Tyreek Hill without the off-the-field stuff. Man, the sky's the limit on what the offense can do at that point. Because you have your Travis Kelce and Noah Fant. You have your ex-receiver. Obviously, Cortland Sutton can do a lot of things. It really does. It just opens up so much what you can do on offense. And it seems like that one really glaring missing piece when you're looking at what the Broncos have right now. Yeah. No, I am.
Like I said, I wrote a whole article on it last week, how that's something that just this offense does not have in its war chest of tools. I mean, Juwan Winfrey, Tim Patrick, Cortland Sutton, Deshaun Hamilton, technically looking at Sanders combine, Sanders too. There's not a true guy that just is like, wow, that guy, if we don't jam him or make the safety have to watch out for him, he is going to be a problem. I mean, I've watched recently probably 5 games of the San Francisco 49ers, and just the space that Marquise Goodwin created for George Kittle and the underneath pass game, from whether it be pre-snap motion to pull guys one direction of the field and to create space behind him, or running deep up the seam to pull back that linebacker and that safety and create kind of bigger areas in those zones to weaken those zones, really was a huge catalyst for the offense. So that's something that, I mean, this team just, I don't think they have right now. And granted, you can do it without speed, but looking at what Shanahan's done and looking at what Drew Lock has done in college, I think that's something that this team is lacking.
Yeah. So. I mentioned last episode that I got this opportunity to work with the local newspaper, and they did ask me what I thought of the AFC West and who's going to win it this upcoming season. And I said, honestly, so much depends on the Tyreek Hill situation, because he changes that Chiefs offense so much, whether he's on or off the field. If he's not on that roster, I mean, Mahomes is good. They still have weapons, but it's just not as good. I would say that the Chargers stand a much better chance of winning the AFC West, as they're a more balanced offense, defense, all that when it comes to what they have on the roster. The Chiefs, though, you add Tyreek Hill to that offense, and I mean, they win a ton of shootouts. Their defense isn't going to be great this year again, but yet you don't have to worry too much when you're scoring 35 points a game. And I think Tyreek Hill is one of those guys that's worth about a touchdown per game.
Yeah, you're probably right. And I mean, not even just the offense, but special teams as well. I mean, the fact that he's even out there returning kicks, people are kicking it out of bounds to avoid him. So, yeah, no, I'm agreeing with you. It's a big thing that's missing from this offense, and we will see if they can do without it this season, or if they can maybe find something. Maybe somebody will show up, but we'll see. But moving on here, we got one more position on the offense that we should talk about here, and that's because we're getting along. What's new? And tight end. And tight end for me is a position that, I mean, there's a lot of questions, but when you got a first-round pick in a devalued, quote-unquote, devalued position like tight end to Noah Fant, and with what Scangarello said about him, just super excited about bringing him in, hard not to be stoked about that. It would be nice to be a little bit more comfortable with the guys behind him, but Noah Fant feeling pretty good about the 1 through 4 right now at tight end, and knowing that they can probably find some other guys to complement him because Noah Fant is just such a unique athletic talent.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that they do need that complement piece. I don't know if they have it on the roster right now or not. I mean, if he and Jake Butt can become that 1-2 punch that a lot of Bronco fans are hoping for, then it's going to feel pretty darn good moving forward. But I did have a question, just because I know the 49ers this last year, you've watched a little bit more than I have of them. They ran a lot more 3 wide than 2 tight end sets, right?
Yes.
So if you had to look at 2020, would you rather add a wide receiver or a tight end? That's of a huge high priority.
Wide receiver.
Okay. I mean, I figured that was going to be your answer. You see some of those teams that have had the 2 tight ends, like the Patriots, when they had Hernandez and Gronk. That was such a dynamic offense that you're just like, who do you cover? How do you cover these guys? Most teams can barely cover 1 tight end, let alone then you have 2 elite tight ends on one roster. Oh my goodness. And so kind of picturing that idea of you add a Fant and then say you add a George Kittle. I mean, I'm not saying we're going to add George Kittle, but a George Kittle kind of type player. That could be pretty darn dynamic of an offense too.
I don't disagree with you, but I think that just the value of the wide receiver position and getting a potential true number 1 to go next to Sutton and Hamilton would be more valuable than getting another tight end 1 type to pair with Fant. Just my opinion. I do like that 2 tight end set, but I think that given the direction of the NFL and everything, and although Grant teams are throwing better out of 12 and 21 personnel than 11, but I think that has a lot to do with getting teams stuck in base and then finding the weakness on the field. But I think that getting a high-end tight end would be more impactful, or a high-end wide receiver would be more impactful than getting another tight end.
I'm in agreement with you on that. I just wanted to kind of get your feel of say the Broncos decided to go in a little bit different direction than maybe what is traditional in today's NFL. Yeah,
I hear you. I just think that getting another tight end or wide receiver, just because the spacing it can create too. I mean, you got a spacing guy on the inside now with Fant, projection wise at least, but I just don't see that with wide receiver. So, and just looking at how the class looks like it's stacking up too, with the crazy amount of talent at wide receiver, it just makes more sense to me. What do you think about tight end?
I don't think this upcoming draft is going to be a great tight end class.
Yeah.
There's not too many names that stick out a whole lot. And I would maybe look at free agency more than I would the draft. But beyond that, I'm with you. The wide receiver position just looks like if you add that dynamic player, and this draft is going to offer some of those kind of players for the Broncos, it really does set things up to be a lot more successful moving forward. And I think it also fits better with Drew Lock's game. And we're talking about designing an offense around Drew Lock. Now, he likes his tight ends, but he also likes his deep ball. And I'd say he likes his deep ball more than he does his tight ends. I mean, you look at when Emmanuel Hall came back from injury this year, that completely changed that offense. They became a pretty scary unit, actually, when you really look at how they've closed out the season. And he was working with a lot of freshmen, sophomores that just were not quite ready for the jump to the college game. And then Emmanuel Hall comes back, and boom, that offense really takes off. So I just think when we're looking at how to design an offense around Drew Lock, wide receiver makes a lot more sense than tight end.
Yeah, nope, I agree with you 100%. And I mean, we'll see what happens, but I feel like a tight end too, you can find a tight end too the day 4, day 5 of the NFL draft, typically. I mean, really, I think you can. Unless you really want to go for that heavy blocking tight end, you want to pay for a Croft or a Nick Boyle, which I still can't believe those blocking tight ends got as much as they did on the open market. But getting a more dynamic wide receiver to pair with Hamilton and Sutton. I just think getting that with Fant and, whatever, we'll see what Drew Lock becomes, but if you can get a really good wide receiver to pair with that, the early transition years are going to be much easier because he's going to be able to lean on the talent around him a little bit. And I mean, even if he just starts off as a point guard type, who can make a big play every once in a while, that could be one of the more exciting offenses we've seen in Denver since 2014. So, all right, well, we've talked about the positions now, but we're going to look a little bit further ahead. We're going to take one more quick break, though.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
All righty, and we are back on the Building the Broncos podcast, and we're going to go over some names here that, Carl, I'm going to kick it over to you because you put this list together. So some 2020 free agents that maybe the Broncos might look into. I mean, they are set to have a lot of cap room. Granted, a lot of that is because a lot of their own starters are set to hit free agency. But there are some interesting free agents in the 2020 season for the offensive side of the ball.
There is, and I know you just got done saying the running back position is not that valuable, but there's a name on this list that I'm kind of going, oh man, if you added a player like him, I would really like what this offense could become, and that's Melvin Gordon of the Chargers. And I don't know. I mean, he's not always been the best running back per se, but I would say he's improved every year during the NFL. Averaged over 5 yards a carry this last year. Is a great receiving option. I mean, one of the better receiving running backs in the NFL, I'd say. And again, improved on that as his NFL career went on. And just has always been a guy that I thought if you add him to an offense like this and give a veteran running back around a guy like Drew Lock, that maybe they could really work well together. Now, I'm not saying go pay this guy big time money or anything like that, and I expect him to get more than I'd be willing to pay. But he's just kind of a little bit of an intriguing player for me because of his versatility as a running back. But I'm looking more at this wide receiver group that could get very interesting because I do think maybe a couple of these guys could hit the open market. Now, Michael Thomas of the Saints, I expect him to get re-signed by the Saints. I mean, he's just one of the top 10 receivers in the NFL. You just don't let players like him go. And then after that, you have Tyreek Hill. I don't even know if he's going to be in the NFL moving forward or not. I don't really want to touch him, honestly. I mean, I've been after Chief fans saying, how could you support this guy? How could you defend anything? I mean, at best, you should be, or at worst, you should be just staying silent and just waiting for the thing to play out. But yet they have to feel like they have to defend this guy. I don't know. And then you come to Amari Cooper, who I do expect the Cowboys to re-sign because you don't trade a first-round pick for a guy and then not re-sign him. But at the same time, they have a lot of other players that they're looking at some pretty big contracts. I mean, if Dak gets the biggest quarterback contract in the NFL, it's going to be hard then to go pay Amari Cooper the money that he's going to get. And if you're talking about a guy that can take the top off a defense, Amari Cooper's not the best at that, but he's not the worst either. I mean, this is a guy that was a 4.4 40 coming out of college, one of the best route runners in the NFL. I mean, seriously, you go watch this guy run routes. If you want to be a wide receiver, go watch Amari Cooper. He doesn't have the best hands in the world, but route running wise, there's very few that I would ever even say are in his league when it comes to that. And then
Jerry Jeudy.
If you're looking for some comparisons on what they can do on the field, that's a pretty good comparison there.
Jeudy might be a little bit more explosive.
He is. I would take Jeudy if we're gonna use a first round pick on a wide receiver. I mean, that's my guy.
Yeah, get in line.
It's true. Colorado. It's true. There's a lot of people getting on the hype train, and you and I are both on that one for sure. But one other free agent that could be hitting the open market, I doubt it, but AJ Green of the Bengals. He's been injury prone, so that doesn't exactly excite me. He's getting up there a little bit more in age, but a guy that definitely can be a downfield threat. Probably of all these guys, Amari Cooper is about the only one that really, really intrigues me that I actually think could maybe make it to the market. Any of the others for you?
I I would really, like, out of everybody you've listed so far, Amari Cooper would be the one that I would go after. Because I think that he isn't a true quote-unquote speed guy, but he does play with speed, and his ability to uncover and play the Z or the slot quickly and be a threat down the field or after the catch, I mean, he would be, I think Skingrilla would just do so much to get him open. And getting a guy like Fant with him too, that'd be incredible. And I mean, I felt bad for Cooper last year in the Raiders, and even the Dallas, they don't really have a great quarterback. I mean, Dak is solid. I'm not a huge fan, though. I did like him coming out, but that was because the day 3 or round 3 value. He went round 4 because of the marijuana thing, but still, like, hasn't developed into a real franchise passer, in my opinion. But getting him in Denver with Sutton and Hamilton, oof. Other than that, though, you can miss me with paying any running back. I mean, what did you expect? I would also like Michael Thomas too, but again, I don't know. But out of these guys, it's probably Amari Cooper.
Yeah, that's where I'm at too. And then the group that actually does really intrigue me a lot is the tight end group. Because as bad as the draft might be, the free agent class could actually be pretty strong. Yeah. You got Eric Ebron, who, while he hasn't quite lived up to his draft spot, he has looked pretty darn good, especially with the Colts. And then you got Austin Hooper, and then the name that intrigues me the most, Hunter Henry. I thought last year before his injury, this is the guy that could really emerge as a top 10 tight end in the NFL. And then, of course, he suffered his injury, lost the season, and so we'll see how he returns for the Chargers this year. But you add him with Fant, because they have very different games. I think that could be one of the best dynamic 1-2 punches at the tight end position since Gronk and Hernandez.
Yeah, I don't think I would pay Ebron Hooper just because they're not good enough blockers as I see a 1-2 with Fant. But I think Henry is well-rounded enough that would be a really fun option to have with Fant, and the 2 tight end sets would be great. I'd probably rather pay Cooper, but again, you're probably paying more for Cooper because the wide receiver tax.
Right.
So.
Right. And I will say with Cooper, he is pretty darn young because he came into the league. I think when he was drafted, he was only 20, wasn't he?
He was very young, 20 or 21.
Yeah. And so he's still really, really young. A lot of promising years ahead of him. And I do want to see how Hunter Henry responds with his injury. But beyond that, man, I mean, if you're looking for maybe that bargain player that could really thrive for the Broncos, this is the guy. Oh, my goodness. I love Hunter Henry. I was disappointed when the Broncos didn't draft him and very disappointed when the Chargers got him.
Yeah.
But how about I let you take on the offensive line guys then, since I've kind of broken down the others here.
For sure. Well, you have Cody Whitehair and J.C. Treader, along with Brandon Scherf, Joe Thuney, Andreas Pete, and Marshall Yanda. Obviously, Brandon Scherf is the crown jewel here because he's entering his second contract, and it was a top 10 pick. It would be absolutely foolish if he hit the market, but I do think that he is going to reset the market when the time comes. I think he's going to be the highest paid interior offensive lineman ever. Deservedly so. I mean, that dude is an absolute tank. It's not just the Iowan and me speaking there. That dude is amazing. And we've seen him play really well in both zone and power schemes, or blocking, so to speak, with the Washington. So if Brandon Scherf hit the market and Denver was interested in paying for a tone setter to play that guard position, Scherf would be, I mean, honestly, top 3 guard in the league. I'd probably right now, I know Quentin Nelson's got the hype coming off right now, but he's playing with a better center next to him and a better offensive system, better coaching staff, better quarterback, etc. I'm taking Scherf right now as a better, more rounded player, especially if you're talking zone scheme as well. And Joe Thuney would be solid. Pete Yanda would be really interesting, although he's getting older. I think he's a Hall of Famer. But overall, though, I mean, none of these guys really stand out too much to me as far as bargains, because any name that is standing out, specifically Scherf, I think they're going to get paid massively in the market. So I think probably more likely you're leaning into Mike Munchak and development than paying top dollar on the open market for offensive line.
The one guy, I mean, that maybe could hit the market that I could see the Broncos really being interested in is Marshall Yanda.
Yeah.
just because, I mean, he's worked in a system very similar to this, was an all-pro in 2014 when he was in this kind of similar system. And, I mean, has always had a great career. And when you're talking about a veteran that could come in and really, really help the young guys, I mean, he makes a lot of sense. I don't know how much football he has left. I haven't really watched him a ton the last couple of years. Yeah.
Injured.
So, I mean, that has to play into it. But I don't think he'll be as expensive when you're talking about a guy that could be hit in the open market.
Yeah. Yep, I agree with you. So I guess out of this list, though, I mean, I'm right now wide receiver hungry. I think Sutton's going to be good, but right now he looks more like Allen Robinson than a great number one option. Deshaun Hamilton looks like probably a high-end wide receiver 3 more so than a wide receiver 2. So I want to get that game changer at wide receiver if that's at all possible. And I think that would open up the offense and make the transition and growth of Locke that much better. So that's where I'm at. What about you? Where are you at as far as, your one hope?
Well, I mean, I'm looking at this group right now of all the free agents that are going to hit the market, and I'm thinking Cooper would be my top target, but it's still very hard because of how good the wide receiver class is looking for the draft.
Yeah.
And so I'm weighing a little bit of the idea of Cooper, at least what he is in the NFL, and he can step in day one and be ready to go, where wide receiver always seems to be that position that takes a little bit to develop. I mean, even like Cortland Sutton this last year, he had some good moments, but he was never a consistent player for the Broncos. Deshaun Hamilton, he was supposed to be one of the more NFL-ready guys, and while it wasn't all his fault, he still struggled sometimes to make an impact.
Yeah.
And so part of me sitting here saying, well, then go pay Cooper, have him, because your wide receiver position is going to be cheap for the next few years. And so you can afford to go pay a Cooper top end money for the wide receiver spot. And again, know what you're getting out of him and having him be a wide receiver 1A with Sutton maybe being 1B kind of thing. And
that's the hope. That's the dream.
Right. That is the dream. Where a rookie, I mean, Jerry Jeudy would be very exciting. And I think he would be pretty NFL ready just because Alabama prepares players for the NFL pretty well. But there's some other names I'm sitting here saying, how much of an impact are they making year one? So Is it more you're thinking when Drew Lock's about to hit his contract is when they're finally hitting their stride?
Yeah, that's a big thing.
It's just hard to weigh all of that right now. But personally, I mean, if Amari Cooper hit the market and he didn't just absolutely go crazy contract-wise, I'd probably, if I'm the Broncos, go ahead and make that decision to go that direction rather than the draft.
Yeah, I mean, then you just have more. It's a bird in the hand's better than two in the bush. Like if you signed him, it's not the potential of it in the draft, right? Then you have other options. You can go after linebacker, defensive line depth, offensive line, et cetera, et cetera. Just get a defensive difference maker. So you'd already have that difference maker wide receiver 1.
Right. That's where I'm at.
Yep. Absolutely. Well, that's going to wrap up today's episode of Building the Broncos, powered by Overtime Media. You can find Carl on Twitter at Carl Dumler MHH and myself at Nick Kendell MHH. Also, make sure you head on over to Mile High Huddle, an affiliate of 24/7 Sports and CBS Sports Digital, to find more content covering the Denver Broncos. Head on over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating and a comment, as your support can help us continue to bring you our Denver Bronco deep dives. You can follow the Building the Broncos podcast and all our other great audio content by subscribing to the Huddle Up podcast wherever you listen to your shows. You can follow us on Twitter at Mile High Huddle and at BTB Football Pod. For Carl, I'm Nick, wrapping up another episode of the Building the Broncos podcast. We hope you guys enjoyed it, and we will see you soon. Go Broncos.